The Unlocked Mind. Freedom from Fear and False Stories. Introduction. Has a Monday morning ever dawned with a sense of dread, not because of a looming deadline, but because of an intangible feeling that something is amiss? Or has a friend's terse text message plunged you into a weekend of gnawing worry, a conviction that you have somehow erred? We all navigate these moments of disquiet, these internal murmurs that can, at times, crescendo into a roar that drowns out all external reality. Life, of course, inevitably presents its array of trails, unexpected setbacks, arduous conversations, the sting of loss. But what if the deepest reservoirs of our suffering, the most tenacious anxieties, do not originate from these events themselves? What if they spring from a far more intimate and often amplified wellspring? Why does a seemingly minor occurrence ignite such an internal tempest? This question has long perplexed many, and its answer, surprisingly simple yet profoundly transformative, resides not in the external world, but within the narratives we weave for ourselves. This book delves into these very narratives. I refer to them as mind-created stories. Envision them as the elaborate dramas, the direst prognoses, the fearful interpretations that our minds concoct, particularly when fear or anxiety takes hold. These stories are not facts, they are our personal, frequently theatrical, constructions. They are akin to the breaking news of our inner landscape designed to seize our attention, often sensationalizing and distorting the truth. Imagine your supervisor requesting a meeting first thing Monday. The simple factual request is precisely that. Yet, your mind might immediately leap to a narrative of imminent dismissal, of professional failure, of every conceivable way you fall short. This entire weekend of apprehension? It was not engendered by the supervisor's request. It was manufactured by the fearful story your mind spun around it. This is a mechanism by which our minds attempt to safeguard us, to alert us to peril, but they frequently misinterpret the signals, painting a far more terrifying tableau than reality warrants. Moreover, these stories are often propelled by a deeper fear or dread of actually experiencing uncomfortable emotions such as sadness, embarrassment, or disappointment. We become so apprehensive of a feeling that we erect immense mental fortifications, these elaborate narratives, to evade it, only to ultimately endure greater pain and distress than if we had simply permitted the emotion to pass. These mind-created stories do more than merely induce discomfort. They actively shape our interactions with others and our comportment in the world. When we are governed by these fearful narratives, we often descend into what I term a cellar dynamic. We begin to market ourselves to others, striving to embody the persona we believe they desire. We might nod in agreement, concur with every sentiment, or conceal aspects of ourselves that we fear will invite rejection. It is an exhausting mode of existence, akin to perpetually treading on eggshells, attempting to appease everyone. This frequently leads us to approach the quest for authentic connections, friends, partners, even colleagues in a manner predisposed to failure. We endeavor to be all things to all people, and in doing so, we end up being truly nothing to anyone. It is a prison of inauthenticity, where the constant pursuit is managing perceptions rather than simply existing. The paradox is that in our fervent efforts to gain acceptance, we often repel genuine connection. What feels like a personal failing, a basis for rejection, is frequently merely an indicator that someone is not a suitable match for our true selves. Rejection, viewed through this lens, is not a deficiency. It is a compass, guiding us away from that which does not serve us and toward those who will embrace us for precisely who we are. This book extends an invitation to step away from the anxious narratives and into the liberation of your own mind. We will explore how to discern these mind-created stories for what they truly are: mere stories, not immutable facts. We will learn to confront the fear that fuels them and, crucially, to cultivate the courage to feel our feelings rather than retreat from them. You will discover how to cast off the oppressive weight of inauthenticity and embrace your genuine, distinctive self. This journey is not about eradicating life's challenges, It is about transforming your relationship with the internal narratives that magnify them. It is about unlocking your mind so that you may experience authentic connection and a profound sense of inner tranquility. Turn the page and let us commence. Chapter 1. Understanding Fear and False Narratives. 1. What is fear? It is a word that can send a shiver through the very marrow, accelerate the heart's frantic beat, and slick the palms with a cold sweat. It is a universal human experience, as fundamental as the rhythm of our breath or the spontaneous eruption of laughter. But what, precisely, is this elusive phenomenon? And why does it so often loom larger, more terrifying, than the precipice that seemingly conjures it? For a considerable span of time, I perceived fear as an external force, something that happened to me. It was a visceral reaction to adversity, to peril, to circumstances beyond my dominion. In many regards, this perception holds a kernel of truth. Our biological architecture is exquisitely designed for self-preservation. Consider the sudden swerve of an oncoming vehicle. What transpires? The heart hammers, muscles coil, and an instinctual surge propels you from harm's path. This is fear functioning precisely as intended. It is an ancient alarm system, a biological endowment that safeguarded our forebears from the jaws of predators and the precipices of treacherous terrain. This species of fear is a lucid, unequivocal directive: danger. Act now to preserve yourself. It is sharp, immediate, and inextricably linked to an authentic, present threat. It is your physiology's urgent cry, beware, coupled with the vital energy surge required for sanctuary. This is the fear that shields us from the searing touch of a hot stove or the fatal plunge from a cliff's edge. It is a guardian, an indispensable compass. Yet, it is here that the terrain becomes more intricate and the profound work of mental liberation commences. The majority of the apprehension we navigate in our quotidian existence is not precipitated by a hurtling automobile or a predatory beast. It is born of phenomena far more ethereal, far more internal. It is the knot of anxiety that tightens in the stomach before a professional engagement, the gnawing dread preceding a socially awkward encounter, the persistent undercurrent of concern regarding the perceptions of others. These are not immediate threats to our corporeal existence, yet they can exert an equally, if not more, overwhelming influence. Their potent grip stems from their transcendence beyond mere signals. They have metamorphosed into elaborate, often phantasmagorical, narratives. This is the juncture where our book's central tenet, mind-created stories, assumes prominence. Our intellect is an indefatigable architect of narratives. It ceaselessly endeavors to apprehend the world, to prognosticate forthcoming events, and to delineate our place within this grand tapestry. When we perceive a faint tremor of disquiet, a whisper of apprehension, our minds do not simply register the signal. Nay, they seize that minuscule ember and fan it into a conflagration of what-ifs. Permit me to illustrate. Envision yourself in a bustling market, a simple bagel slipping from your grasp, a minor, ungraceful mishap. The bagel tumbles, perhaps acquiring a slight deformation beneath a shelf. In objective reality, it is merely a dropped bagel, a fleeting inconvenience. But what transpires within the labyrinth of your mind? If ensnared by the tendrils of mind-created stories, it might unfurl into a lament such as, "Oh, the clumsiness. Everyone witnessed it. They deem me an imbecile. How utterly mortifying. I cannot fathom my own ineptitude. The embarrassment will linger throughout the day. Perhaps now, due to my awkwardness, people will shun me." Observe the alacrity with which a dropped bagel escalates into a tableau of social devastation. The fear is not intrinsically linked to the bagel. Rather, it is tethered to the narrative the mind has meticulously constructed around the incident, a narrative of personal deficiency, public ignominy, and future ostracization. The fallen bagel becomes irrefutable evidence of our inherent imperfection. This constitutes the fundamental divergence. Primal fear is a harbinger of external peril. Mind-created fear is a chronicle of personal inadequacy or anticipatory suffering, frequently ignited by an event of minor import or even neutrality. The fear we experience with such intensity is often the apprehension of the narrative, not the verity of the situation. It is the fear of imagined disgrace, of predicted downfall, of anticipated repudiation. Our minds possess an extraordinary faculty for imbuing neutral occurrences with negative personal significance, thereby transforming a simple signal into a profoundly felt dread. This leads us to a crucial revelation. Frequently, we are not genuinely apprehensive of the external event itself. What we truly dread is the feeling that we anticipate will accompany it. This is the fear of feelings to which I alluded previously. We recoil from the sting of embarrassment, the oppressive weight of sorrow, the gnawing ache of solitude, or the crushing blow of inadequacy. We apprehend the sheer discomfort of these emotions so acutely that we will undertake extraordinary measures to elude them. Consider the analogy of sensationalized news coverage. At times, the media can inflate a minor incident into an apocalyptic scenario, can it not? It seizes our attention with alarming headlines and dramatic soundscapes. Our minds operate in a similar fashion with our emotions. If we foresee the onset of sadness, our minds might fabricate a narrative asserting, "If I feel sad, I will be unable to cease. This sorrow will be eternal. It will be insufferable." The fear is not of the sadness itself, but of the overwhelming, uncontrollable essence that our minds have ascribed to it. We dread the concept of the feeling, the story of its impending torment, more than the sensation itself. This dread of experiencing unwelcome emotion serves as a potent impetus for our conduct. It is the reason we might hesitate to voice our insights in a meeting, despite possessing valuable perspectives, for we fear the sensation of appearing foolish. It is the reason we might remain tethered to an unhealthy relationship, for we fear the void of loneliness that a separation might engender. It is the reason we might procrastinate on crucial tasks, for we fear the specter of failure should we not execute them flawlessly. These apprehensions are not primarily rooted in the external circumstance. They are concerned with the internal emotional topography that we are terrified of traversing. This ceaseless exertion to circumvent uncomfortable feelings precipitates a fallacious sense of control through avoidance. When we sidestep a situation that we fear might engender anxiety or shame, we experience a transient reprieve. We reassure ourselves, "You see, I abstained and I was spared that dreadful sensation." This fleeting relief reinforces the pattern of avoidance. It instills in our minds the belief that evasion is a successful strategy for emotional regulation. However, this strategy is a snare. Each instance of avoidance effectively corroborates our mind's assertion that the feared emotion is unendurable and that we are incapable of confronting it. We are never afforded the opportunity to discover that we can experience uncomfortable emotions without being annihilated by them. We never ascertain that these feelings, while disagreeable, are ephemeral and frequently manageable. Instead, avoidance entrenches the fear. It renders the dreaded situation appear even more perilous and diminishes our perceived capacity for resilience. We become prisoners of our own circumvention, ensnared in a cycle where the dread of feeling dictates the trajectory of our lives, and the mind-created stories proliferate with ever-increasing complexity and conviction. Therefore, let us return to that fundamental inquiry: what constitutes fear? In its most pristine, elemental form, fear is a signal of authentic, immediate peril, engineered for our survival. It is a physiological response, a surge of adrenaline, an accelerated pulse, a tightening of muscles, all coalescing to prepare us for combat or flight. This is the fear that serves us, the fear that safeguards us from harm. But the apprehension that most of us contend with, the apprehension that engenders such profound suffering, is of a different ilk. It is a fear that has been contorted, magnified, and distorted by the narratives our minds weave. It is a fear not of an immediate threat, but of a future possibility, a perceived personal failing, or the anticipated sting of an uncomfortable emotion. It is a fear born from our interpretations, our anxieties, and our deeply entrenched, often erroneous, convictions about ourselves and the world. The fundamental distinction resides in their origin and complexity. Primal fear is a simple, direct response to an external threat. Mind-created fear is an intricate, internal narrative that transmutes a minor signal into a story of personal catastrophe, frequently propelled by a profound dread of experiencing uncomfortable emotions. Our mind sees a neutral event, imbue it with negative personal significance, and consequently, we become afraid of the story, and more acutely of the feelings that the story pretends. This predisposition of our minds to assign meaning to things about ourselves is the engine that fuels this amplification. It is not merely that we fear failure, we fear what failure reveals about us, that we are insufficient, intellectually deficient, or lacking in inherent worth. This personal interpretation is what transforms a minor setback into a profound dread. The mind-created story is not solely about the event. It is about our identity, our value, and our place in the cosmic order. It is why a dropped bagel can feel like a personal indictment. The narrative asserts, this clumsy act confirms your fundamental flawedness and disqualifies you from receiving respect. The ensuing fear arises not from the physical act of dropping food, but from the terrifying conclusion the mind has drawn about our very essence. And if we delve a little deeper, what is the predominant emotion that most individuals genuinely fear experiencing? It is often a confluence of shame, inadequacy, and a profound sense of being fundamentally erroneous or deficient. We dread shame because it pronounces us morally compromised. We dread inadequacy because it declares us incapable. We dread not being enough because it suggests we are unlovable or undeserving of connection. These are the deep, often subconscious, fears that animate so many of our mind-created narratives. When we anticipate a situation that might evoke these feelings, our minds immediately construct a story to shield us from that perceived unbearable emotional pain. The narrative might be, refrain from attending that gathering. You will experience awkwardness and isolation, thus confirming your inability to forge connections. The true fear is not the awkwardness itself. It is the deeper dread of validating the story that we are inherently unlovable or incapable of genuine communion. This fear of experiencing these core negative self-perceptions is so formidable that it can render us inert, prompting us to eschew life rather than risk confronting these terrifying internal states. We become so consumed with averting imagined emotional agony that we forfeit the richness and authenticity of existence itself. Comprehending this dichotomy between primal fear and mind-created fear is the inaugural stride. It is akin to illuminating a darkened chamber and realizing that many of the perceived specters are merely phantoms cast by the machinations of our own minds. Once we grasp that a significant portion of our fear is a narrative, a projection of potential discomfort rather than an immediate threat, we can commence to interrogate the chronicle. However, before we can challenge these narratives, we must first identify their most prolific architects, the deeply ingrained beliefs and assumptions that form the bedrock of our illusory selves. This compels us to explore the very nature of these false narratives. 2. Managing anxiety and feelings. It is a curious phenomenon, is it not? So much of our existence is dedicated to the avoidance of discomfort, to the meticulous steering clear of anything that hints at unpleasantness. Our very wiring compels us toward pleasure and away from pain, a natural imperative. Yet, somewhere along this path, a profound apprehension takes root not merely of pain, but of the sensations it engenders. We begin to dread embarrassment, to fear rejection, to recoil from sadness, or even the subtle prickle of anxiety. This dread of our own internal climate wields a formidable influence, becoming a primary architect of the elaborate, fear-laden narratives our minds so readily construct. Consider, if you will, the gravest consequence of a moment of embarrassment. Perhaps a flush creeps up your neck, your speech falters, or a warmth spreads across your skin. It is undeniably an uncomfortable experience. But is it perilous? Is it an existential catastrophe? For the vast majority, the answer is a definitive no. Yet, our minds, particularly when ensnared by the tendrils of anxiety, possess the uncanny ability to transmute this ephemeral discomfort into an event of cataclysmic proportions. The ensuing mental script might read, "Everyone witnessed my misstep. They now perceive me as clumsy and foolish. My reputation is irrevocably tarnished." Observe the swift metamorphosis of a simple, observable event or stumble into a dramatic chronicle fraught with dire personal repercussions. This is not merely about the act of tripping, it is about our terror of what that stumble signifies about our very being. This aversion to feeling is often a more potent adversary than the feeling itself. It mirrors a phobia of rainfall. A gentle shower might leave one slightly damp, a generally benign outcome. But to those paralyzed by a dread of wetness, the world shrinks to an indoor existence, peering anxiously through windows, convinced of impending deluges that will obliterate all. The fear is not of the rain, but of the experience of being drenched. Our anxious minds function as prodigious storytellers, yet their narratives are frequently misaligned with reality. They seize upon a minor, factual event and inflate it into a full-blown disaster epic. Recall the time a bagel slipped from your grasp and landed on the floor? A simple, factual occurrence. But what unfolded within your mind? Did it register as a mere oops, dropped a bagel? Or did a narrative begin to unfurl? Perhaps it was, "I am so hopelessly clumsy, I cannot even retain my sustenance." How utterly mortifying. What if someone observed? They will undoubtedly deem me a wreck. The mind-constructed tale is not about the fallen bagel, it is about your perceived personal inadequacy, your dread of appearing imperfect, or contemplate a common workplace scenario. Your supervisor requests a report by Monday morning. The fact, a report is required. The mind-created story, "Oh dear, this is dire. They must be profoundly dissatisfied with my performance. I am likely to be dismissed. This signifies my utter inadequacy, the premature end of my professional journey." This narrative is a virtuoso performance of anxiety-fueled hyperbole, transforming a straightforward directive into a personal condemnation and a prophecy of ruin. The actual fact is merely a deadline. The story is a fear-driven projection of the bleakest possible outcomes, meticulously crafted to inflict maximum distress. These self-generated narratives are the principal wellspring of our emotional turmoil. They do not merely reflect our fears, they actively cultivate them. The more credulously we embrace these stories, the more acute our anxiety becomes, and in turn, the more persuasive these narratives appear. It is a self-perpetuating cycle, possessing an astonishing potency. The mind, in its misguided attempt to shield us from perceived threats which are frequently merely feelings we are terrified of, encountering weaves these intricate tapestries of dread, ultimately inflicting far greater suffering than the original circumstance ever could. The pivotal revelation here is that these sensations, these anxieties, are not indelible inhabitants of our being. They are transient visitors. They may arrive unannounced, and they can indeed linger beyond their welcome, but they are not intrinsic to the fundamental architecture of who you are. When enveloped by anxiety, it is facile to succumb to the belief that this state is your new normal, your immutable self. But this is the discourse of the narrative. The truth is that feelings, even those of profound intensity, are ephemeral. They wax and wane. The mastery of anxiety lies not in its perpetual eradication, but in cultivating the capacity to inhabit the feeling, to acknowledge its presence without allowing it to come and deem your reality. It is the understanding that you possess the resilience to weather the storm. Herein lies the dawning comprehension of the profound unreliability of our anxious minds. When anxiety holds the reins, our thoughts cease to be objective observations. They are heavily refracted through a prism of fear and dire prognoses. It is akin to depending on sensationalist news outlets for your daily intelligence. They often seize a kernel of truth, amplify it, distort it, and present it in a manner designed to incite maximum drama and indignation. Your anxious mind performs an analogous operation on the tapestry of your life. It magnifies minor occurrences into national emergencies. It transmutes neutral observations into personal assaults. Thus, when your mind begins to spin a yarn of impending doom, pose the question, is this the factual news report, or is it the fear-infused tabloid rendition? Is this a dependable narrator, or is it a mind held captive by apprehension? Recognizing this inherent fallibility is the inaugural step toward reclaiming your agency. It signifies that you are not obligated to accept every anxious thought that surfaces as gospel. You can begin to scrutinize it, to hold it up to the light and discern its true nature, a construct of the mind, not an unassailable truth. This is precisely why the practice of feeling the feeling, though seemingly antithetical, holds such paramount importance. If embarrassment is our dread, the notion of deliberately placing ourselves in a situation where we might experience it can appear preposterous. But recall the fallen bagel. What if, instead of succumbing to a spiral of self-recrimination, you simply acknowledged, indeed, I dropped my bagel. It's a bit messy and yes, a touch embarrassing. Such things happen. By permitting yourself to experience that mild embarrassment without judgment, without allowing it to metastir into a full-blown calamity, you effectively disarm it. You demonstrate to yourself that you can endure this sensation and emerge unscathed. Indeed, you may even glean wisdom from it. The apprehension of experiencing a specific negative emotion serves as a potent catalyst for these mind-generated narratives. When we fear rejection, our minds conjure scenarios of universal opprobrium and exclusion. The narrative is not about the mere potential for rejection, it is about the agonizing torment of feeling that rejection. Consequently, the mind fabricates a tale that preemptively shields us from that perceived suffering by compelling us to forego that situation entirely, or by crafting a narrative so dire that the actual event, should it transpire, appears comparatively less devastating. It is a perverted form of self-preservation. Consider the corporeal manifestations of anxiety. When you experience that constriction in your chest, the accelerated pulse, the flutter in your stomach, or the knot of dread, these are physical phenomena. They are signals from your body. Yet, all too often, our minds immediately affix a narrative to them. This tightness in my chest signifies a cardiac event. This racing heart means I am losing control. These butterflies portend spectacular failure. The mind-created story imbues a physical sensation with catastrophic meaning about our own persons. The key to navigating anxiety and its accompanying emotions lies in beginning to disentangle these elements. When you perceive that physical sensation, can you pause even momentarily and simply observe it? Can you articulate, my heart is beating rapidly at this moment. This is what it feels like to be anxious. It is uncomfortable, but it is merely a sensation. This act of detached observation, of separating the physical experience from the terrifying narrative, is profoundly empowering. It communicates to your mind that you are in command, that you are not a victim of these sensations and the purported meanings they convey. You are simply experiencing a feeling, and feelings, by their inherent nature, are transient. The mind-created story frequently fixates on the perceived personal significance of events. If someone is brusque with you, the objective fact is their curtness. But the mind-created story might be, they are incensed with me. I must have committed some transgression. I am a flawed individual. The narrative assigns a negative interpretation about you to an external action. This is a classic hallmark of mind-created stories fueled by anxiety. They transform neutral or ambiguous situations into personal condemnations. Therefore, when you find yourself descending into a spiral, pause to draw breath. Inquire of yourself, what is the objective reality of this situation? What is the narrative my mind is constructing about this reality, particularly concerning myself? And what is the feeling that narrative is attempting to shield me from? By dissecting the story in this manner, you begin to perceive its underlying structure. You discern the fear at its foundation, the assumptions upon which it is built, and the exaggerated outcomes it foretells. This is not an exercise in feigning the absence of difficult emotions. It is about cultivating a more voracious engagement with them. It is about recognizing that while feelings such as anxiety, sadness, or fear are indeed uncomfortable, they are also integral facets of the human condition. They are signals, not immutable judgments. They are temporary sojourners, not permanent residents. And when we cease to fear the feelings themselves, and instead direct our attention to the narratives our minds craft about them, we begin to unlock a profound sense of liberation. We start to perceive that the true confinement is not the feeling, but the mind-created story that insists we are incapable of enduring it. Having begun to grasp the nature of anxious feelings and the inherent fallibility of our fear-driven accounts, we now direct our focus toward the fundamental distinction that unfurls true freedom, the divergence between the objective facts of a situation and the subjective narratives we meticulously weave around them. This discernment will prove indispensable in dismantling the dominion these tales exert over us. 3. Facts vs. Personal stories. It's a curious paradox, is it not? So much of our existence is colored by worry, by apprehension, by a pervasive sense of melancholy. We are quick to attribute these shadows to external forces, the pressures of our professions, the complexities of our relationships, the sheer, overwhelming weight of the world. But what if the vast majority of our internal turmoil originates not from these external circumstances, but from the narratives we meticulously construct about them? Consider the unfolding of life. It presents us with an endless stream of events, some radiant, some bleak, and a multitude that simply are neutral, devoid of inherent emotional charge. The sky is a particular shade of blue. Rain falls. Your supervisor has requested your presence in their office come Monday morning. These are facts, observable realities, verifiable by any impartial witness. They are the unvarnished skeleton of any given situation, carrying little emotional valence in their pure form. They are, in essence, the raw, unadorned material of existence. Herein lies the subtle, yet profound, complexity. Our minds are extraordinary engines of narrative creation. Particularly when tinged with anxiety or fear, they spring into a frenetic activity, seizing upon these neutral facts and weaving them into elaborate, deeply personal tapestries. These are not mere recounting of events. They are intricate sagas, imbued with our most profound anxieties, our lingering wounds, and our somber premonitions of what lies ahead. These are what we term mind-created stories. Let us revisit that simple fact. Your boss has requested your presence in their office come Monday morning. In isolation, it is merely an informational utterance, a scheduled appointment. Yet, for many of us, the mind refuses to rest there. It embarks on a rapid, often catastrophic, trajectory. The ensuing narrative might well unfold thusly. Oh, dear heavens, why would my boss summon me? It must portend dire news. They are about to inform me of my inadequacy. Perhaps dismissal is on the horizon. My professional trajectory is in jeopardy. How shall I meet my financial obligations? I am destined for failure. Observe the breathtaking speed with which we transmute a simple meeting into an unmitigated disaster. The fact was an appointment. The story was a full-blown catastrophe, saturated with feelings of inadequacy, panic, and profound dread. And the consequence? It is the story, not the fact, that robs us of our weekend repose, afflicts us with visceral unease, and renders us tense and unfocused as we face Monday's obligations. The suffering arises not from the actuality of the meeting, but from the anxious narrative our minds have so diligently concocted. This is the essence of what I mean when I speak of our minds engaging in a form of self-inflicted gaslighting. It is as if our own internal chronicler is deliberately attempting to persuade us of a reality far more grim and distorted than the truth. It instills in us the conviction that these dramatic, fear-laden narratives are indisputable truths, and that they signify something deeply personal and negative about our very being. It is akin to our minds whispering, "This is happening to you," and it is a direct consequence of your inherent flaws or deficiencies. Consider another commonplace scenario. You are engaged in conversation with a friend and they appear somewhat withdrawn, less effusive than usual. The fact is this: your friend is quiet. That is the entirety of the observable reality. However, your mind, perhaps conditioned by past experiences of perceived rejection or a lack of affection, may instantly leap to a narrative. They no longer hold me in high regard. I must have said or done something to offend them. They are displeased with me. I am on the precipice of losing this cherished friendship. Suddenly, this quietude, which could stem from an infinite array of other causes, fatigue, preoccupation with a professional challenge, a simple headache, is transmuted into a personal indictment of your worth. The dread of losing the friendship, the mortification at the thought of having erred, the gnawing uncertainty of the situation, all these agonizing sensations are born from the story, not from your friend's mere quietude. Our minds function as the most sensationalist news outlets imaginable, perpetually seeking a headline, perpetually poised to amplify the mundane into the momentous. They seize upon a minor event and transform it into a personal crisis of national proportions. And the more acutely anxious we become, the more tenaciously these sensationalized narratives take root. It is not necessarily a malicious intent on the part of our minds. Often, they are attempting to safeguard us by preempting the worst possible outcomes. Yet, in this endeavor, they forge a reality far more terrifying and agonizing than the one that actually exists. This is how we come to fear our own internal responses. We are not apprehensive of the event itself. We are paralyzed by the dread of the catastrophic emotional fallout that our story about the event foretells. This incessant churning of anxious narratives constructs a veritable prison. We inhabit these internal dramas, accepting them as the unassailable verity. This compels us to adopt behaviors that are fundamentally inauthentic. We might engage in incessant people-pleasing to avert the narrative of rejection, or we might retreat into isolation to escape the narrative of inadequacy. We become so consumed with managing our internal theatrics that we lose touch with our authentic selves, and our capacity for genuine connection with others is compromised as we project our internal dramas onto them and react to these projections. The truly liberating revelation, the one that can initiate the unchaining of your mind, is this profound insight: your stories are not facts. They are interpretations. They are constructs. And, most crucially, they are fundamentally separate from you. You are not your anxious thoughts. You are not your direst imaginings. You are the discerning observer of these thoughts and imaginings. The instant you truly comprehend that your suffering originates from the narrative and not from the event itself, you acquire an immeasurable reservoir of power. This is not an exhortation to feign ignorance of adversity or to disregard genuine predicaments. Rather, it is about cultivating the discernment to pause, to observe, and to pose a simple yet profound inquiry: what is the objective fact in this situation, and what is the story my mind is presently fabricating about it? When you can begin to effect this crucial separation, you commence to perceive that the catastrophe frequently resides within the confines of your intellect, not within the fabric of your lived reality. Let us delve more deeply into that analytical query: what is a concrete, relatable example of a neutral fact that commonly triggers a disproportionately anxious personal story in most people, and what are the typical elements of that story? Consider the reception of an electronic communication. The fact could be as prosaic as, I received a text message from my partner that states, "We need to talk." This is a piece of unvarnished information. It reports an action that has transpired. There is no inherent judgment, no predictive element, no emotional valence within the fact itself. However, for an individual predisposed to anxiety, this single fact can instantly precipitate a cascade of mind-created stories. The characteristic components of such a narrative typically coalesce around themes of personal deficiency, social ostracism, or the imminent threat of abandonment. The story might then unfurl in this manner. The escalation, the phrase "we need to talk" itself is laden with perceived negative implication. It is seldom employed as a prelude to felicitous tidings. The personal interpretation: they are dissatisfied with me. I must have done something to provoke their displeasure. They are contemplating ending our relationship. The mind, with startling alacrity, attributes the cause to a personal failing. The ultimate catastrophe: this is it. It is irrevocably over. I am condemned to solitude. The mind leaps with unbridled abandon to the most devastating conceivable outcome. The apprehension of emotion: I am incapable of enduring this. I shall be utterly undone. My heart will be shattered. I shall be a spectacle of despair. The narrative is frequently constructed around the anticipation of overwhelming emotional anguish. The reinforcement of self-doubt: I harbored a silent conviction of my own inadequacy for them. My propensity for error is inescapable. The event becomes the irrefutable proof of deeply ingrained negative self-perceptions. In this illustrative instance, the fact is merely an overture for communication. The mind-created story is a fully realized epic of relational devastation, fueled by primal fear and a bedrock belief in one's own inherent shortcomings. The suffering, the visceral churning in the abdomen, the rapid thrumming of the heart, the obsessive rumination, is a direct consequence of embracing and engaging with this narrative, rather than with the neutral fact of the text message itself. Now, let us turn our attention to the second analytical inquiry: how does the feeling associated with a personal story, for example fear, shame, inadequacy, reinforce the belief in the story's truth, and what is the cyclical nature of this reinforcement? This is precisely where the insidious trap snaps shut. When your mind conjures a terrifying narrative, it does not merely present you with abstract thoughts. It floods your physiological being with commensurate emotional responses. If the story pertains to imminent dismissal, you experience palpable fear and anxiety. If it concerns a deficiency in your character, you are assailed by feelings of shame and inadequacy. These emotional states possess an extraordinary potency. They feel authentic, visceral, and irrefutably true. The inherent problem lies in our brain's fundamental wiring. It is predisposed to interpret intense emotional experiences as indicators of truth. If you feel profoundly terrified, it is a natural, almost instinctual, conclusion to infer that a genuinely terrifying situation must be unfolding. This marks the genesis of the cycle. 1. The mind fabricates a narrative. Your mind constructs an anxious tale, e.g., my supervisor intends to terminate my employment. 2. The narrative evokes emotions. This narrative triggers potent emotions of fear and apprehension. 3. Emotions validate the narrative. Because these emotions are so potent and tangible, your brain interprets them as definitive confirmation that the narrative must be accurate. I am experiencing such profound fear, therefore it must be true that I am on the verge of being dismissed. 4. The belief becomes entrenched. You become utterly convinced of the narrative's veracity. You begin to conduct yourself as if dismissal is an inevitability, perhaps withdrawing, becoming defensive, or exhibiting an excessive eagerness to please, actions that can, ironically, render you less effective. 5. The cycle perpetuates. This solidified belief and subsequent behavior then serve to reinforce the original fear, thereby increasing the likelihood that your mind will generate analogous narratives in the future, and with even greater emotional intensity. It is a self-perpetuating feedback loop. The fear generated by the narrative imbues it with a sense of authenticity, which in turn engenders further fear, thereby amplifying the narrative's perceived truthfulness. It is akin to a self-fulfilling prophecy wherein your internal drama dictates your perceived reality. The shame you experience in response to a perceived transgression leads you to believe you are inherently a shameful individual, and this conviction then renders you more susceptible to any situation that might reawaken that sense of shame. This underscores the paramount importance of recognizing that these emotions, however overwhelming, are frequently the byproducts of our mind-created stories. They are signals of the narrative's presence, not necessarily indicators of external peril. The suffering does not emanate from the external event. It originates from the story we construct about it and the subsequent emotional cascade that story precipitates. By acknowledging this cyclical dynamic, we can commence to interrupt its momentum. We can begin to perceive that intense fear is a signal that our mind is engaged in narrative construction, not necessarily a harbinger of impending apocalypse. The capacity to liberate your mind resides in recognizing this fundamental distinction. Facts represent the unyielding ground beneath your feet. Mind-created stories are the ephemeral clouds upon which you may find yourself adrift. They can possess an uncanny verisimilitude, a deceptive solidity, and an overwhelming presence. Yet they are not the ground. And once you apprehend this distinction, you can begin to choose where to place your footing. You can commence to navigate the world based on what is actually occurring, rather than on the anxious fables your mind has so ingeniously devised. This is the initial, indispensable stride towards genuine liberation from fear. 4. Embracing authenticity. We dedicate so much of our existence to the pursuit of being liked. Reflect on this. Our words are meticulously chosen, our attire strategically selected, and we may even feign enjoyment for things we do not. All in a bid for that approving nod, that warm smile, that comforting sense of belonging. It is as if we are perpetually on a stage, engaged in a ceaseless act of self-promotion. This, I term the seller dynamic. We operate in the business of convincing others of our adequacy, our compatibility, our worthiness of their selection. And the impetus for this? Deep within, fear whispers its insidious narratives. These are the fabricated tales of the mind we have previously discussed. They insinuate, should they perceive your true self, they will not favor you. Or perfection is the prerequisite for love. Or to reveal your vulnerabilities is to invite rejection. Such narratives render our authentic selves inherently flawed or utterly insufficient for the world's embrace. Consequently, we erect a facade. We become actors, embodying roles we surmise others desire. This perpetual performance is utterly draining. It resembles the precarious juggling of a dozen spheres, all while striving to project an aura of effortless ease and contentment. We are so consumed by managing our image, by ensuring not a single sphere tumbles, that no genuine energy remains for the act of living itself or for forging meaningful connections with others. When ensnared in this seller mode, our relationships devolve into mere transactions. We do not seek authentic communion. We seek validation. Implicitly or explicitly, we pose the query, do you find me agreeable? Am I sufficient for your regard? This engenders a profound sense of disquiet. We remain perpetually vigilant, apprehensive of exposure. A persistent, low-grade anxiety may permeate our existence, a feeling of treading on eggshells, constantly anticipating the desires of others, and striving to embody them. It is a solitary state, even amidst company, for the individual with whom others connect is not truly you. It is a meticulously constructed illusion, and illusions are inherently fragile. This unceasing compulsion to please, to solicit approval, is directly propelled by a dread of specific emotional states. The apprehension of embarrassment, for instance, can compel us to conceal any facet of ourselves that might be perceived as awkward or unconventional. The fear of rejection serves as a potent catalyst, driving us toward conformity, compelling us to smooth our rough edges and eschew any behavior that risks eliciting a negative response. The dread of disappointment can lead us to overcommit, agreeing to requests we do not wish to fulfill, for the act of refusal feels fraught with peril. These are the machinations of mind-created narratives, asserting that these feelings are unendurable, that they will shatter us, and that the sole recourse is to assume an identity other than our own. But what if we were to invert this paradigm? What if, instead of being a seller, we assumed the role of a buyer? Envision possessing a unique set of cards imbued with your distinct strengths, eccentricities, passions, and necessities. The buyer mindset eschews the endeavor to make everyone covet your cards. It is predicated on comprehending your own cards, cherishing them, and subsequently seeking individuals whose own cards harmonize with yours. It is an affirmation of, "This is my essence. This is what I contribute. I seek genuine connection, not universal approbation." This transformation feels radical, given our profound conditioning to seek external validation. Yet, it is extraordinarily liberating. When you adopt the buyer persona, you are not desperately attempting to persuade anyone. You are simply presenting yourself with candor and observing who resonates with that truth. You are not soliciting approval, you are seeking compatibility. This liberation allows for relaxation. You can simply be yourself, with all your imperfections and your singular perspective on the world. Your energy redirects from the pursuit of something from others, their approval, to the simple act of being and offering who you are and observing the ensuing resonance. Consider it thus: when you are vending a product, you are in a state of constant anxiety regarding the customer's reaction. You endeavor to divine their thoughts, to ensure their contentment, to finalize the transaction. But when you are the buyer, you are evaluating whether the product meets your requirements. You seek quality, a fitting match. You are empowered. This is the potency of the buyer dynamic. It reinstates you at the helm of your own existence and your own sense of self-worth. Your value is not determined by the multitude who desire your wares. It is inherent in the cards you hold. This leads us to the concept of rejection. For the majority, rejection represents the ultimate failure. It serves as confirmation of our deepest, mind-created fears. See? I told you they would not like you. Yet, as we embrace authenticity, rejection begins to assume a markedly different aspect. Rather than perceiving it as a personal indictment, we come to regard it as a signal of incompatibility. If an individual does not connect with your authentic self, it is not necessarily a deficit within you. It is merely an indication that you were not a suitable match for them, nor they for you. This, in fact, is a beneficial outcome. Imagine endeavoring to cultivate a friendship with someone whose values or interests are diametrically opposed to yours. It would be a perpetual exertion, a drain on your vitality, and you would likely find yourself feeling perpetually misunderstood and frustrated. When you are authentic, you are more inclined to attract individuals who genuinely appreciate and comprehend you. And when someone fails to connect with you, it simply signifies that you are creating space for those who will. It is an organic process of filtration. The transcript posits that if everyone approves of you, it may signal a lack of genuineness. This is a challenging notion, yet it possesses a significant kernel of truth. If you are perpetually agreeable, eternally smiling, and consistently uttering the correct sentiments, it is probable that you are not revealing your complete self. You are presenting a persona engineered for maximum appeal, which implies it is likely not the full, complex, and occasionally untidy iteration of you. Authentic connection emerges when we are seen, flaws and all. When everyone approves of you, it suggests that perhaps no one truly knows you. The antithesis of authenticity is a form of self-imposed confinement. When we conceal our true selves, we exist in a perpetual state of dread concerning exposure. Each interaction becomes a precarious tightrope walk. We may feel as though we are suffocating, unable to articulate our genuine thoughts or emotions. This is what individuals describe as a hellish existence, a life lived behind a mask, where the sheer effort of maintaining the facade is more agonizing than any potential rejection. We become so terrified of being disliked that we end up profoundly disliking ourselves, for we are not living in alignment with our own truth. This prison is constructed by the narratives we fabricate in our minds. We tell ourselves that our authentic selves are too overwhelming to countenance, too peculiar, too sensitive, too opinionated, too reserved. We believe that if we permit these aspects to surface, individuals will recoil, judge us harshly, and we will be left utterly alone. Thus, we sequester those aspects. we erect ramparts around our hearts and our minds. However, these ramparts offer no protection, they ensnare us. They alienate us from the very connection we yearn for. The energy expended in maintaining these barriers is immense, leaving us depleted, anxious, and profoundly unfulfilled. The irony lies in the fact that the very qualities we strive most assiduously to conceal are often those that render us relatable and distinctive. We fret that our eccentricities, our insecurities, our past missteps are so egregious, so mortifying, that no one could possibly comprehend them. Yet, the reality is that what feels most personal and unique to us is frequently what is most universal. Consider that feeling of awkwardness at a gathering, or the sting of a bygone regret, or the clandestine desire you fear to acknowledge. The probability is high that millions of others have experienced precisely the same sentiments. When we muster the courage to share these untidy facets of ourselves, a remarkable transformation can unfold. Instead of repelling others, it can draw them nearer. It grants them permission to be imperfect as well. It shatters the illusion that everyone else possesses their lives perfectly in order. This is the genesis of profound, authentic connection. It is not founded upon an ideal of flawlessness, but upon a shared comprehension of our human fallibility. So, how do we transition from being a seller to a buyer? How do we commence embracing this authenticity that feels so profoundly vulnerable? It is a process, not an instantaneous conversion. It commences with awareness. It begins with observing when you are attempting to perform, when you are striving to persuade, when you are prioritizing another's imagined opinion above your own truth. A practical initial step involves practicing honesty in minor ways. Perhaps it is declining a request for which you lack the requisite energy, even if you experience a pang of guilt. Or it might be voicing a mild opinion that diverges from the prevailing sentiment of the group, rather than remaining silent. Take note of the mind-created stories that surface. They will perceive me as difficult, or I shall disrupt the harmony. Subsequently observe the actual outcome. Frequently, the catastrophe we envision does not materialize. The world does not collapse. The sky does not fall. Another crucial step is the cultivation of self-compassion. When you falter, when you utter something you regret, or when you feel that familiar urge to retreat, extend kindness to yourself. Remind yourself that you are human, and that while mind-created narratives are potent, they are not immutable reality. Treat yourself with the same understanding and patience you would bestow upon a cherished friend. This self-compassion is the fertile ground upon which authenticity can begin to flourish. We must also actively challenge the mind-created stories that assert our emotions are perilous. If the narrative dictates, "I cannot reveal my sadness, for they will deem me weak," practice allowing yourself to experience that sadness within a secure environment. If the story proclaims, "I cannot express anger, lest I lose control," practice acknowledging the anger without resorting to destructive actions. The more we permit ourselves to engage with our feelings, the less dominion they exert over us, and consequently, the less compelled we feel to conceal them. The adoption of a buyer mindset entails the recognition that your inherent worth is non-negotiable. It is not something you acquire through the appeasement of others. It is something you possess by virtue of your very existence. This represents a profound paradigm shift that necessitates diligent practice. It involves the conscious decision to prioritize your own needs, your own interests, and your own boundaries. It signifies an understanding that your unique confluence of attributes possesses intrinsic value, and you need offer no apology for it. As we commence to embrace authenticity, we begin to discern those who genuinely resonate with us. We discover individuals who appreciate our quirks, who comprehend our vulnerabilities, and who connect with us on a more profound level because we are being genuine. These are the authentic connections, the ones that sustain us and imbue us with a sense of being truly seen and valued for who we are. These relationships are not constructed upon a foundation of performance, but upon a mutual acknowledgement of our shared humanity. The journey toward embracing authenticity is a progression away from the fear-infused narratives our minds concoct, and toward a more courageous, truthful, and fulfilling mode of being. It is about stepping from behind the guise and allowing our true selves to be known. This does not imply becoming abrasive or inconsiderate. It signifies the integration of our authentic selves into our interactions with discernment and self-awareness. It means comprehending that our value is not contingent upon universal approval, but upon our own internal reservoir of worth. By embracing our authentic selves, not as a terminal point, but as an ongoing practice, we begin to dismantle the very underpinnings of the fear and illusory narratives that have held us captive. This courageous act of self-acceptance, however, is not an isolated undertaking. The subsequent phase of our journey toward liberation involves comprehending how these authentic connections are not merely forged, but also sustained, propelling us from the internal emancipation of authenticity to the profound experience of genuine human communion. 5. Accepting yourself. We often harbor a clandestine conviction that a superior iteration of ourselves lies dormant, a more refined, capable, and lovable being awaiting emergence. This notion, that we are inherently deficient and in perpetual need of mending, constitutes one of the most tenacious and detrimental narratives our minds construct. It is a tale spun from the very fibers of apprehension, the dread of inadequacy, the terror of scrutiny, and the profound disquietude of rejection should our genuine selves be laid bare. This narrative insinuates that our perceived imperfections are glaring flaws, rather than integral components of the intricate tapestry that defines us. Consider this. We expend prodigious energy curating our outward presentation, striving to project an image we believe will elicit approval. We may suppress our candid opinions, stifle our distinctive humor, or feign interest in subjects that leave us unmoved, all in an endeavor to conform to an imagined mold of others' expectations. This ceaseless performance is not merely enervating, it is akin to inhabiting a self-imposed confinement. Each attempt to embody another persona adds another bar to the cage, ensnaring us in a state of profound inauthenticity. The emotional cost is staggering. A persistent undercurrent of disquiet, a sense of never being truly perceived or understood, and a gnawing solitude even amidst company. We become adept at masquerade, yet in so doing, we sever our connection with the individual beneath the guise. This is the insidious manner in which our minds gaslight us, persuading us that the self we conceal is the one truly unacceptable, when in truth, it is the very essence of our being. The internal monologues that reinforce this delusion are relentless. If they knew the real me, they wouldn't like me, or I must be flawless for their acceptance. These narratives, amplified by anxiety, convince us that our vulnerabilities are fatal weaknesses destined for our undoing. Yet, here lies the liberating verity. Authenticity is the most potent balm for this ingrained insecurity. When we finally grant ourselves absolution from performing, from striving to be someone we are not merely for the sake of garnering favor, we begin to unbolt the doors of that prison. This is not an exhortation to recklessness or disregard. It is a conscious choice to present ourselves as we are, with our strengths and our struggles, our elations and our sorrows. This is where genuine communion with others transcends possibility to become an inevitability. When we cease to conceal our hand, as the idiom suggests, we invite others to reciprocate. We forge an expanse for unvarnished discourse, for laughter that springs from unadulterated mirth, and for mutual solace born of comprehending each other's authentic experiences. The effort previously channeled into maintaining a facade can now be reoriented towards cultivating profound connections grounded in truth and vulnerability. The apprehension of rejection is a colossal propellant of this inauthenticity. We conjecture that should we unveil our true selves, we would be met with scorn or abandonment. However, in the pursuit of genuine connection, rejection serves merely as an indicator of incompatibility. It is not a pronouncement upon our intrinsic value. Reflect upon it from a different vantage point. When you encounter someone new, do you instantly forge a bond with Everyone? Assuredly not. You may find some individuals captivating, others agreeable, and some with whom you simply fail to resonate. This is natural. Not everyone will mirror your frequency, and that is perfectly acceptable. It signifies not a deficiency within you, but rather that you have yet to discover your kindred spirits. Embracing this reality liberates us from what I term the sales dynamic. Instead of feeling compelled to persuade others to embrace us, we can adopt a more equitable posture. We offer ourselves as we are and observe who genuinely responds. This paradigm shift is profoundly liberating. It means we cease to interpret a lack of connection as a personal failing and begin to perceive it as an indication that our paths or modes of being simply diverge. The facets of ourselves that we most dread, our vulnerabilities, our eccentricities, those slightly untidy aspects we endeavor to keep concealed, are frequently the most universally resonant. What feels like a deeply personal shame or mortification is, more often than not, a shared human experience. We might feel embarrassed by a past misstep, anxious about our capacity to navigate a particular scenario, or self-conscious about a physical attribute. These sentiments can feel profoundly isolating, fostering the belief that we are uniquely flawed. Yet, when we dare to share these dimensions of ourselves, even subtly and with decorum, we often discover that others have traversed similar terrain. This readiness for vulnerability is not a weakness. It is a potent conduit to deeper connection. It is the very embodiment of true belonging. When we witness that others comprehend our trials, our anxieties, and our imperfections, we realize we are not solitary. This shared humanity is the adhesive that binds us. It is the dawning recognition that the very elements we fear exposing are often those that enable others to connect with us on a more profound level, nurturing empathy and mutual understanding. Therefore, what does it truly signify to embrace oneself? It is not an overnight transformation where every aspect of oneself is suddenly cherished. That is an unrealistic expectation and, quite frankly, another fabrication of the mind. Rather, self-acceptance is an active, continuous volition. It is a pledge to honor and acknowledge your entirety, even the parts you are still refining, the parts that present challenges, or the parts you are still endeavoring to comprehend. It is a declaration that your intrinsic worth is not contingent upon your perfection or the approbation of others. This choice necessitates the active confrontation of that relentless inner critic. We must recognize that the harsh judgments and condemnations our minds inflict are often merely another narrative, devoid of objective assessment of our value. These critical voices are typically reverberations of past anxieties, societal expectations, or insecurities that have been amplified into a saga of inadequacy. By interrogating these narratives, by posing the question, is this story factual or is it merely a fear-driven interpretation? We begin to diminish their dominion. Let us examine more closely how the mind's inclination to gaslight us into believing we are intrinsically flawed contributes to our reticence in revealing our authentic selves. This is not a deliberate act of malevolence by our minds. Instead, it is a survival mechanism that has become somewhat overzealous. In our formative years, and indeed throughout adulthood, we learn that certain behaviors or expressions of self can precipitate adverse outcome, scolding, ostracization, or neglect. Our minds, ever vigilant for perceived threats, begin to associate these actions with peril. Over time, this transmutes into an internal narrative that specific aspects of our being are inherently erroneous or unacceptable. For instance, a child consistently admonished to be quiet and refrain from expressing intense emotions may cultivate a mind-constructed narrative that their feelings are burdensome and unwelcome. As they mature, this narrative can morph into a deep-seated dread of divulging their true emotional state, compelling them to suppress their feelings and project a placid, detached demeanor even when internally turbulent. The internal dialogues that fortify this are diverse. My emotions are too much for others. If I reveal my distress, they will perceive me as weak, or I must contain this to avoid causing disruption. These narratives are so persuasive because they are underpinned by past experiences that our minds have interpreted as evidence of our inherent deficiencies. They inform us that the very parts of us that are most vibrant and genuine are those that will precipitate our downfall, rendering the prospect of revealing our true selves terrifying. In what ways does the act of concealing one's hand or presenting an authentic self engender a self-imposed prison? And what are the tangible, emotional, and relational repercussions of existing in such a state? The metaphor of a prison is apt as it underscores the confinement and absence of liberty inherent in inauthenticity. When we perpetually monitor our utterances, actions, and expressions to ensure their alignment with a fabricated persona, we expend an immense reservoir of mental and emotional energy. This energy could otherwise be allocated to creativity, joy, learning, or genuine connection. The prison walls are constructed from the fear of exposure, the dread of an inadvertent slip that would reveal the actual individual beneath. Every interaction becomes a precarious balancing act, and the constant vigilance is utterly draining. The tangible emotional consequences are profound. We experience a pervasive sense of disquiet, a feeling of being perpetually on the precipice of revelation. This can manifest as anxiety, stress, and even depression. There exists a profound, ingrained loneliness, a sensation of being fundamentally misunderstood, even when surrounded by individuals who ostensibly care for us. We may perceive a lack of purpose or fulfillment, as our lives are misaligned with our authentic values and aspirations. The ceaseless exertion required to maintain the facade depletes our vitality and can precipitate burnout. Relationally, the repercussions are equally significant. Authentic connection necessitates vulnerability and mutual comprehension. When we are inauthentic, we impede this process. Others may admire the persona we project, but they do not truly know or engage with the real us. This can engender superficial relationships devoid of depth and intimacy. We may find ourselves repeatedly drawn to individuals who reinforce our inauthentic selves, or we may experience frustration and resentment because others seemingly fail to grasp us. Furthermore, by withholding our true selves, we deny others the opportunity to truly know and cherish us. We deprive them of the chance to connect with the unique and invaluable individual that we are. This can precipitate a cycle of disappointment and isolation, reinforcing the very fears that initially prompted our inauthenticity. The prison of inauthenticity is a solitary confinement, erected by our own fear-laden narratives, but the auspicious tidings are that the key to its liberation has invariably been within our grasp. Having grasped that our suffering often originates from the narratives we propagate and the fear of our own sentiments, and recognizing that genuine liberation resides in embracing our authentic selves rather than pursuing external validation, we are now poised to explore how to actively dismantle these fear-based narratives and cultivate profound resilience. This directs us to the crucial faculty of discerning between objective reality and the subjective tales our minds weave. Chapter 2. Building True Connections and Self-Belief. 1. The Truth About Rejection. We often navigate life as if ensnared in a capricious game, its rules perpetually shifting, each misstep poised to precipitate our downfall. The specter of rejection stands as the most formidable antagonist in this arena, its insidious whisper suggesting that a lack of affinity, an unchosen path, a turning away, betrays some fundamental defect within us. This is no ephemeral notion, it is a deep-seated dread that can paralyze us before we even attempt connection. We erect fortifications, conceal our true visages, and expend prodigious energy contorting ourselves into what we perceive others desire. But what if the very notion of rejection as personal failing is merely another anxious fabrication of our minds? Let us be unequivocal. The sensation of rejection is acutely real, its sting profound. It can land like a physical blow, leaving us feeling exposed and wanting. Our minds, in their primal drive for self-preservation, immediately leap to the direst conclusions. They register not merely a solitary missed connection, but extrapolated into a sweeping, absolute indictment. I am unlovable. I am insufficient. I am destined for solitude. These are the narratives our minds weave, the exaggerated tales that inflate a single event into a lifelong sentence. The tangible repercussions of internalizing these stories are immense, leading to the forfeiture of genuine friendships, profound partnerships, and even professional advancement. We may shy away from asking for a date, decline an invitation to join a collective, or remain silent in discourse, all because the phantom of rejection looms larger than the promise of connection. Consider it thus: each individual possesses a unique tapestry of experiences, a singular lens through which to perceive the world, and a distinct constellation of needs and aspirations. When two individuals encounter each other, it is akin to presenting their hands, revealing their cards. At times, the hands align with exquisite perfection. Shared values, mutual amusement, and effortless understanding, these foster a sense of kindred spirits. Yet, at other junctures, the hands diverge. You may hold a royal flush, while they possess a modest pair. Neither hand is inherently bad, they simply fail to constitute a winning combination for that particular encounter. Rejection, viewed through this prism, is not a judgment upon the quality of your cards, but a simple declaration that your hand was not the optimal fit for their game at that specific moment. The mind, however, often perverts this into, "My cards are worthless. I am a dreadful player." This is the narrative that amplifies the pain and distorts the event's true significance. This leads us to a pivotal recalibration, the transition from the seller dynamic to the buyer dynamic. When gripped by the fear of rejection, we tend to assume the posture of sellers. We feel compelled to perform, to accentuate our finest attributes while concealing any perceived blemishes. We meticulously curate our online personas, rehearse conversations ad infinitum, and exert ourselves to appease others, hoping they will purchase our wares. Our focus narrows so intensely on securing approval that we lose touch with our own needs and desires. We incessantly query, "What do they want?" rather than "What do I want? And does this person resonate with my core being?" This performative stance is utterly exhausting and, paradoxically, often repels others, erecting a barrier of artifice. The other party senses the incompleteness of the portrayal, and the interaction feels less like genuine connection and more like a sales pitch. The fear of rejection is the very engine that propels this seller dynamic. It fuels the internal pronouncements that insist, "If they witness my true self, they will not like me." These are the specific internal narratives that sabotage authentic self-expression. We may admonish ourselves, "I am excessive, I am inadequate, my eccentricities are bizarre, or my past errors define me." These are the anxious stories that cultivate a terror of our own feelings. If we anticipate judgment, we endeavor to suppress that apprehension and project an image of composure and collectedness in an authentic facade. This dread of our own internal landscape, the fear of embarrassment, awkwardness, or exposure, is what compels us to conceal ourselves. The fear of rejection then becomes the ultimate justification for this concealment. We rationalize, "I am merely hiding to avoid rejection," when in reality, we are actively engineering the very circumstances that impede genuine connection. The antidote to this predicament lies in embracing the buyer dynamic. In this mode, your objective is not to market yourself, but to discern. You are seeking compatibility. You present yourself as you are, and you observe whether the other person genuinely connects with your authentic self. This does not imply rudeness or entitlement. It signifies an honest articulation of who you are, what you value, and what you seek. It entails a willingness to be imperfect, to embrace the inherent messiness of being human, for it is within this authenticity that true connection flourishes. When you operate as a buyer, you are not desperately soliciting validation. You are seeking genuine resonance. You inquire, "Does this person appreciate me for who I am?" Not, "Does this person approve of the persona I have constructed?" Herein lies the power of authenticity as the ultimate filter for genuine connection. When you embody your true self, you naturally repel those who are not a congruent match. They may perceive you as too much, too intense, or not what they envisioned. And that is entirely permissible. Their lack of resonance is not a reflection of your intrinsic worth. It is a sign that you are drawing nearer to individuals who will resonate with your authentic essence. Imagine tuning a radio. You twist the dial, encountering static, a competing signal, or a faint transmission. You continue until you lock onto your desired station, the one that plays your cherished music with pristine clarity. Being authentic is akin to tuning your own internal radio. Some will hear only static, but others will perceive your unique melody with unwavering strength. Those who hear the music are the ones destined to connect with you. This is the practical embodiment of the book's central tenet. By embracing your authentic self, you cultivate the fertile ground for genuine connection, rather than perpetuating the anxious narrative of needing to be someone else to gain acceptance. Furthermore, it is profoundly empowering to recognize the universality of the rejection experience. What feels like an intensely personal and mortifying failing is, in fact, a deeply human commonality. Every soul, at some point, has experienced the sting of unacceptance, of not belonging, of being misunderstood. The narratives we construct about our own awkwardness or perceived inadequacies are often amplified renditions of shared human struggles. When we dare to be vulnerable, when we reveal our baggage, our quirks, our past missteps, our genuine emotions, we extend an invitation for another to respond, me too. This vulnerability is not a weakness. It is the very mechanism that dismantles barriers and fosters profound, meaningful connection. Envision meeting someone new. Instead of launching into a meticulously crafted account of your accomplishments, you might share a humorous anecdote of a public stumble or voice a sincere apprehension about an ongoing project. When the other person reciprocates with a similar story or a knowing nod, a bridge is formed. They recognize your shared humanity, and your messy and peculiar facets become not reasons for rejection, but common threads capable of binding you together. Thus, how does the mind's propensity for crafting anxious narratives specifically magnify the pain and perceived significance of rejection? It is akin to identifying a hairline fracture in a teacup and convincing oneself the entire vessel is on the verge of disintegration. When rejection occurs, the mind perceives not merely an isolated instance of incompatibility. It triggers ancient alarm systems, signaling peril, unworthiness, and fundamental defect. It draws upon past wounds, inflates present anxieties, and projects them onto the future. This narrative-generating apparatus then conjures tales such as, "They did not favor me because I lack intelligence," or "This signifies, I shall never find love," or "Everyone is scrutinizing me at this very moment." These stories imbue the event with a personal and immutable negative meaning, transforming a simple mismatch into a devastating pronouncement upon one's entire being. The tangible consequence is paralysis by fear. We shun situations where rejection might loom, we self-censor, and we develop a hypervigilance to any hint of disapproval, which, ironically, can render us less approachable and more anxious, thus increasing the very likelihood of the feared outcome. Given that authenticity is paramount, what are the specific internal stories or fears that inhibit individuals from presenting themselves authentically? And how does the fear of rejection fuel these internal narratives? The primary narratives are rooted in a profound conviction that our true selves are unacceptable. We dread judgment, not solely from others, but from ourselves. We harbor the fear that if our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, our unvarnished selves are revealed, others will recoil. This fear of rejection acts as the ultimate propellant for these narratives. It is the rationale for our need to conceal. The story becomes, I must conceal my flaw, insecurity, past transgression, because to do otherwise would invite rejection, and rejection is intolerable. Consequently, we construct elaborate defenses. We may become people pleasers, perpetually agreeing and withholding dissenting opinions, because the narrative dictates that disagreement precipitates rejection. We may adopt a posture of relentless self-criticism, and judgment of others, projecting our own fear of imperfection onto the world. We might even project an aura of unshakable confidence and arrogance as a shield for underlying insecurities, because the narrative dictates that weakness is unacceptable and will lead to rejection. The fear of rejection does not merely induce apprehension about external opinions, it instills dread of our own thoughts and feelings about ourselves, trapping us in an inescapable cycle of inauthenticity. Ultimately, the fear of rejection is a potent illusion, a self-spun narrative that estranges us from the very connections we yearn for. By comprehending its true nature, that it often stems from incompatibility rather than inherent inadequacy, and by embracing our authentic selves, we not only navigate potential rejections with enhanced resilience, but also forge a path toward profound self-belief. This newfound clarity regarding our own intrinsic worth, independent of external affirmation, serves as the bedrock upon which we can truly construct a life imbued with purpose and belonging. 2. Finding genuine connections. We expend a prodigious amount of energy striving for approbation, for assimilation, for the elusive ideal of what we imagine others desire. We meticulously buff our rough edges, conceal our eccentricities, and artfully sculpt our digital personas, all in the fervent hope of discovering a sanctuary of belonging. Yet, what if this ceaseless endeavor to placate, this elaborate performance of acceptability, is precisely the impediment to the profound, authentic connections we so deeply crave? What if the very key to unearthing our kindred spirits lies not in molding ourselves into a more palatable form, but in allowing our genuine selves to radiate, imperfections and all? Consider the parallels. When one endeavors to market a product, one invariably showcases its most compelling attributes, downplays any perceived deficiencies, and remains perpetually attuned to the prospective buyer's approval. This is the essence of the seller dynamic. We, in turn, become purveyors of our own selves, desperately seeking validation from an audience to embrace the curated version we present. This, however, is an arduous and ultimately unfulfilling pursuit, is it not? It seldom engenders genuine rapport. Instead, it cultivates superficial acquaintances, relationships precariously balanced on the precipice of artifice. Authentic connections, the kind that replenish our spirits and foster a profound sense of being truly seen, are forged through a different alchemy. They are built upon the bedrock of authenticity. They are predicated on the principle of discovering one's tribe, one's people, those whose unique resonance harmonizes with the distinct frequency of you. It is as if each of us possesses an intrinsic emblem, a sigil representing our true essence, replete with our singular qualities, passions, and even our vulnerabilities. When we endeavor to conceal this sigil or alter it to conform to perceived external expectations, we obstruct the very individuals who would genuinely cherish its revelation, who would recognize it and exclaim, "Ah, yes, this is one with whom I resonate." When we cease our role as sellers and assume the mantle of a discerning buyer, one in search of an authentic congruence, the entire dynamic undergoes a profound transformation. We become more at ease, more inquisitive, and more candid. The imperative to persuade evaporates. Instead, we observe, we intuit, and we ascertain whether a spontaneous spark, a shared wavelength, exists. This transition from performative display to unadorned presence is the crucible where the magic of genuine connection is wrought. It is an invitation to manifest as you are, not as you believe you ought to be. This naturally propels us toward a concept that frequently instills a visceral dread, rejection. We recoil from it, perceiving it as an unequivocal indictment that proclaims, "You are insufficient." But what if we were to reframe our perception of rejection? What if it were not a judgment upon our inherent worth, but merely an indicator of incompatibility? Envision yourself at a gathering engaging in conversation with another. The exchange unfolds, yet no palpable connection materializes. There is no spark, no shared levity, no effortless flow. You part ways and it scarcely registers. It is not a personal affront, It is simply a discordance. The same tenet applies to more profound connections. When an individual does not resonate with our authentic self, it does not signify a fundamental deficiency within us. It merely indicates that we have not found a harmonious alignment with that particular person. The self-fashioned narrative that insists, if they do not favor me, I am inherently unlovable, wields considerable influence. It is a narrative fueled by apprehension, a narrative that persuades us that every instance of non-connection constitutes a catastrophic, personal failing. Yet, the verity is that not everyone is destined to occupy our inner sanctum. And this is not merely acceptable, it is imperative. Consider it akin to a sophisticated filtration system. When you present your authentic self, you effectively activate this filter. Those destined to connect with you will be drawn to your genuine energy, your singular perspective, your intrinsic essence. Those who are not a suitable match will naturally recede. This is not a diminution, it is an augmentation. It is the clearing of a path, thereby creating greater espacio for individuals who will truly appreciate you. The specter of rejection often paralyzes us, preventing even the initiation of dialogue, the unveiling of even a sliver of our true selves. We erect fortifications, ostensibly to shield ourselves from its sting, but in doing so, we also obstruct the very possibility of authentic warmth and belonging. This is where the fallacy of too much infiltrates. We harbor the apprehension that if we are overly boisterous, excessively opinionated, unduly sensitive, ardently passionate, remarkably eccentric, or anything in excess, we will overwhelm others. We will be perceived as too much. This fear frequently originates from past experiences where our unvarnished selves were not met with acceptance, or from the pervasive societal pressure to conform. However, here lies a liberating revelation. Perhaps being too much for some individuals is precisely what renders you just right for others. When you endeavor to be agreeable to all, you dilute your essence. You become a watered-down facsimile of yourself, and it becomes exceedingly difficult for anyone to forge a profound connection with something so attenuated. Genuine connection flourishes through specificity. It is about embodying the precise degree of you that resonates with the precise individuals. Imagine yourself as a complex spice, such as cardamom. Certain palates adore cardamom. It imparts a magnificent depth to their culinary creations. Others may find it excessively potent or unusual for their taste. Does this render cardamom an inferior spice? Assuredly not. It simply signifies that it possesses a distinct appeal. When you embrace your entirety, including those facets you may have been conditioned to conceal, your fervent passions, your unconventional interests, your deeply held convictions, even your moments of disarray, you transmit an unambiguous signal. You declare, "This is I in my entirety." And those individuals drawn to this signal are the ones who will truly behold you, embrace you, and cherish you for who you are. They will not implore you to alter. They will be captivated by the very attributes that render you unique. Let us delve further into the ways our internal narratives shape our capacity for connection. The stories we narrate to ourselves regarding our own worth form the bedrock upon which all our relationships are constructed. If our internal monologue whispers, "I am insufficiently engaging," we will approach interactions with a subtle desperation, attempting to affirm our value through excessive complacence or by incessantly reciting what we believe others wish to hear. If the narrative dictates, "I am excessively sensitive," we may tread lightly around our own emotions, apprehensive of being perceived as frail or difficult, and in so doing we deny others the opportunity to comprehend and support us. The mind-constructed narratives that most directly undermine our connections typically revolve around the apprehension of judgment and the need for external validation. We may harbor narratives such as, "If I reveal my true feelings, they will deem me weak and depart. If I articulate my genuine opinion, they will dissent and reject me. Perfection is a prerequisite for love. Everyone else has life's complexities resolved, and I alone am adrift." These narratives are not immutable truths. They are anxious interpretations devised by our minds to safeguard us from perceived threats, yet in actuality they isolate us. They erect a chasm between our inner experience and our outward presentation, rendering genuine connection an impossibility. To cultivate authentic connections, we must first confront these internal narratives. We must recognize that the dread of judgment is frequently far more potent than the actual judgment, and that true acceptance arises from being perceived, not from being flawlessly presented. So, how do we embark on this practical application? How do we transition from the internal labor of dismantling these narratives to the external act of presenting our authentic selves in social arenas? It is a progressive undertaking initiated through small, courageous steps. Foremost, cultivate self-awareness. Observe your internal dialogue during interactions with others. What narratives are unfolding within your consciousness? Are you preoccupied with their thoughts? Are you striving to impress them? Merely acknowledging these patterns constitutes the initial, potent stride. Secondly, experiment with modest acts of authenticity. This does not necessitate divulging your most profound secrets to an unfamiliar acquaintance. It entails expressing a genuine, mild preference, admitting ignorance, or articulating a simple inclination. For instance, instead of offering a perfunctory, "Yes, that sounds wonderful," to a dining selection that fails to ignite your enthusiasm, you might articulate, "That sounds appealing, but I was also contemplating alternative venue as I've heard their specific dish is exceptional." This represents a minor, low-risk method of asserting a preference without imposing demands. Thirdly, reframe rejection. This is paramount. When a connection falters, or when an individual does not reciprocate your overtures as anticipated, resist the impulse to immediately assign blame to yourself. Instead, pose the following inquiries. Was this individual a congruent match for my energetic disposition? Did I present myself authentically, or was I attempting to embody someone else? What insights can I glean from this interaction regarding my aspirations for connection? If you were genuinely yourself and the congruence did not materialize, it is an indicator of incompatibility, not a blemish upon your character. It is, quite simply, the universe subtly guiding you toward individuals with whom a more harmonious alignment exists. This exemplifies the paradox of rejection. The more we embrace the prospect of rejection, the less dominion it exerts over us, and the more freely we can embody our true selves, thereby augmenting our prospects of discovering genuine connection. Consider Sarah. For years, Sarah felt perpetually engaged in a performance. She was an inveterate people-pleaser, consistently acquiescing, perpetually striving for amiability. She worked in a bustling office environment and found it arduous to forge friendships. She participated in office gossip, feigned amusement at jokes that elicited no mirth, and generally sought to blend into the background. She experienced a profound sense of solitude, a conviction that no one truly knew her. Her internal narrative was, "If I reveal my authentic, slightly unconventional self, they will perceive me as peculiar and shun me." One day, a new colleague, Mark, joined her team. Mark was distinct. He openly espoused his passion for obscure independent films, sported idiosyncratic t-shirts, and did not hesitate to confess when he lacked knowledge. Sarah found herself drawn to his uninhibited authenticity. During a coffee break, the customary office discourse shifted to weekend engagements. Sarah, as was her wont, was poised to offer a generic, agreeable response. But then she observed Mark enthusiastically recounting his intention to attend a local poetry slam, an activity she secretly adored, but had always felt too mortified to mention. A faint whisper of courage, amplified by her burgeoning yearning for something tangible, made itself heard. "Oh, a poetry slam? I adore those," she blurted out, her heart commencing a frantic cadence. She immediately braced herself for a dismissive glance, a perfunctory nod, any indication that would validate her apprehension. Instead, Mark's eyes ignited. "You're into poetry slams? Which ones have you frequented?" That small, authentic declaration unlatched a portal. Sarah, emboldened, began to articulate her affection for spoken word, her fascination with avant-garde documentaries, her subtly unconventional sense of humor. To her astonishment, Mark did not recoil. He leaned closer. He shared his own passions, his own vulnerabilities. Before long, they were partaking in lunches together regularly, discussing a spectrum of topics from cinematic theory to the optimal method for preparing a perfect cup of chai. Other colleagues noted the shift. Some were intrigued, and a select few, who had also felt compelled to perform, began to cautiously reveal themselves. Sarah realized that her fear of being too much had been the genuine impediment. By daring to be herself, even in a modest fashion, she had attracted an individual with whom she profoundly resonated. She had found her tribe not by altering herself, but by finally presenting them with her emblem. This transition from performance to presence is about reclaiming one's inherent power. It is about recognizing that one's worth is not determined by the quantity of admirers, but by the degree to which one accepts and cherishes oneself. When one operates from a foundation of self-acceptance, one naturally exudes an aura of confidence and openness. One becomes less needful, less desperate for external validation, and more adept at forging bonds predicated on mutual esteem and genuine affection. The narratives our minds construct can be remarkably persuasive, painting a tableau of a world where only the polished, the agreeable, and the conventionally ordinary are embraced. However, this represents a distorted perspective. The world teems with individuals who seek authenticity, who are weary of pretense, and who yearn for genuine connection. They are awaiting an encounter with the genuine you. 3. Overcoming self-doubt. Self-doubt, a pervasive cloak of inadequacy, often clings with the tenacity of a winter garment worn through summer. It whispers insidious untruths, a constant refrain that you are insufficient, not bright enough, not captivating enough, not inherently worthy. This inner critic compels you to recede, to falter, to question whether your genuine self could ever truly be embraced. Yet, a vital truth lies beyond this internal clamor. That voice of doubt is not reality. It is a fiction spun by your own mind, frequently born of apprehension and fear. Consider your consciousness a broadcasting station. At times, it transmits unvarnished facts. The sky is blue, it's time for sustenance. Other moments, however, it airs sensationalized headlines and dramatic pronouncements. That presentation was a disaster. Everyone considers you inept. Or they haven't replied immediately. They must be incensed with you. These hyperbolic broadcasts are what we term mind-created stories. While they possess an arresting verisimilitude, they are not objective verities. They are interpretations, amplified by the potent filter of fear. Self-doubt stands as one of the most common and acutely painful of these narratives. It is the chronicle that declares you fundamentally flawed, destined for failure, or doomed to rejection should your true essence be revealed. This story is not grounded in a balanced appraisal of your existence. It is often constructed from a scant handful of flimsy evidence, inflated to gargantuan proportions. Our self-doubt is not an intrinsic attribute of our being. It is a narrative architected by minds ensnared by anxiety. It is a tale we spin for ourselves, frequently influenced by the echoes of past hurts or the incessant drone of societal expectations to conform to a prescribed ideal. We may have stumbled in the past, uttered an awkward phrase, or fallen short in an endeavor. Our minds, in a misguided attempt to shield us from future suffering, seize these isolated incidents and meticulously weave them into an expansive tapestry of perceived inadequacy. These become the irrefutable proof that we are, in truth, not good enough. It is akin to a malfunctioning phonograph, perpetually stuck on a groove of imagined imperfections. The mind magnifies minor missteps into definitive indictments of our unworthiness. This is not an honest evaluation, it is a biased report, and we are frequently ensnared by its artifice. This is the mind's insidious method of self-sabotage, compelling us to question our own perceptions and intrinsic value. The apprehension of being perceived as too much by others, or conversely, not enough to meet their unarticulated expectations, exemplifies this psychological phenomenon. These are not objective characterizations of your disposition or capabilities. They are fictions your mind conjures, particularly within social or romantic contexts, to maintain a state of vigilance and, paradoxically, to inhibit the expression of your authentic self. If you internalize the belief that you are too much, you may feel compelled to attenuate yourself, to adopt a more subdued and unobtrusive demeanor. Conversely, if you embrace the notion of being not enough, you might engage in compensatory behaviors, striving assiduously to embody what you surmise others desire. Both of these reactions are instigated by the mind-created narrative of inadequacy, rather than by the reality of your true nature. This tenacious self-doubt is often propelled by a more profound underlying mechanism, the dread of experiencing certain emotions. When we harbor doubts about ourselves, we are frequently not merely questioning our aptitudes, but more significantly, we are anticipating the disquieting feelings that might surface if our perceived shortcomings were to be laid bare. We recoil from the shame that could engulf us in the wake of an error. We dread the mortification of being unable to provide an answer. We harbor anxieties about the isolation that might ensue should we face rejection due to our perceived lack of sufficiency. This fear of encountering these arduous emotions is so potent that it impels us to circumvent circumstances where they might arise. And how do we effect this evasion? By concealing our true selves. We adopt a facade, meticulously curate our public image, and endeavor to project an identity we deem acceptable. However, this act of concealment, this refusal to manifest our authentic selves, is precisely what entrenches self-doubt. It constitutes a pernicious cycle. Self-doubt engenders a fear of emotional exposure, which precipitates concealment, which, in turn, amplifies self-doubt. Consider a commonplace scenario. You are participating in a professional deliberation, and an idea germinates within you. However, the instant you contemplate voicing it, the self-doubt narrative commences its insidious work. What if my notion is fatuous? My colleagues are demonstrably more astute. They will perceive me as lacking comprehension. The underlying dread transcends the mere concept itself. It is intrinsically linked to the prospect of appearing foolish or ignorant. The shame and embarrassment you envision are so overwhelming that they impose silence. You remain quiescent, not due to a paucity of valuable insights, but because you are paralyzed by the fear of the emotions that might accompany the potential scrutiny of your idea. This dread of emotional repercussion rooted in self-doubt deprives you of an opportunity to contribute and to forge a connection. The most potent counteragent to this pervasive self-doubt resides in the courageous act of embracing and articulating our authentic selves. This necessitates a willingness to present ourselves as we are, encompassing all the facets that may feel untidy, imperfect, or even a trifle peculiar. When we cease our efforts to conform to a predefined mold, when we forego the performance of seeking external validation, we dissolve the internal dissonance that forms the very foundation of self-doubt. The prodigious energy we expend in maintaining a pretense, in striving to embody the persona we believe others desire, is profoundly enervating. It breeds insecurity, as we exist in a perpetual state of guardedness, terrified of a misstep that might reveal the real us. When we finally resolve to abandon this exhausting charade and simply inhabit our own skin, the internal pressure begins to abate. Reflect upon the realm of romantic courtship. Instead of meticulously constructing an artificial persona, feigning enthusiasm for activities you secretly disdain, or concealing your baggage, your past experiences, your idiosyncrasies, your vulnerabilities, what transpires when you resolve to be transparent? When you disclose something susceptible, such as your apprehension regarding commitment or a past emotional wound, you are not merely divulging a flaw. You are extending a fragment of your genuine being. This act of authenticity accomplishes two crucial objectives. Firstly, it facilitates a more profound and meaningful connection with the other individual. If they resonate with your authentic self, the bond is established upon truth, not illusion. Secondly, it functions as a potent sieve. Should the other person recoil from your genuine self, it imparts vital information. You are not a compatible match. This is not a pronouncement upon your inherent worth. It is an indication of divergent cards, as one might metaphorically describe it. It liberates you from the ceaseless self-interrogation of whether they truly appreciate you. You ascertain whether they appreciate you or not, and in either eventuality, you achieve clarity. This brings us to our perception of rejection. Self-doubt frequently compels us to transmute rejection into a personal condemnation. If an invitation goes unanswered, if a romantic encounter fails to materialize into a second meeting, if a job application isn't successful, our mind-created narrative of inadequacy exclaims, "See, we forewarned you that you were not adequate." However, as we begin to surmount self-doubt, we commence to perceive rejection through a different lens. It is not a verdict upon our character or our intrinsic value. It is, quite simply, a datum point. It is a natural consequence of the undeniable fact that we are all distinct individuals, possessing unique needs, desires, and trajectories. Not everyone will align with us, and that is perfectly acceptable. When we grasp that not every individual is destined to connect with us, and that rejection is merely a signal of diverging cards, that is, disparate life experiences, temperaments, and aspirations, it liberates us from the exhausting anxiety of attempting to appease everyone. This acceptance of incompatibility profoundly diminishes the dominion of self-doubt. A potential friend's delayed response to a text message does not signify your unlovability. It may indicate their current preoccupation, their personal struggles, or simply that you were not an ideal fit for each other's social constellations. This realization empowers you to proceed without internalizing it as a personal failing, freeing you to discover an individual with whom a more harmonious connection can be forged. And perhaps one of the most profoundly comforting revelations in overcoming self-doubt is the recognition of the pervasive nature of our individual struggles. What feels like a singular, mortifying defect, a deeply personal wellspring of inadequacy, is frequently a shared human experience. We are prone to believing that our insecurities are unique to us, that we alone grapple with these particular anxieties, or the sensation of not being enough. This sense of isolation is what can render self-doubt so incapacitating. Yet, when we dare to articulate these vulnerabilities, when we voice our trepidations about commencing a new professional role, for instance, a remarkable phenomenon often ensues. Instead of censure, we are met with nods of empathy. Colleagues may recount their own analogous experiences of feeling overwhelmed or uncertain when embarking on novel undertakings. This is not an indicator of weakness, it is a testament to our shared humanity. The most intimate struggles frequently prove to be the most universal. Articulating these aspects of ourselves, when contextually appropriate, does not diminish us. It cultivates deeper connections and validates our own lived experiences. It affirms that we are not solitary voyagers on this journey. Thus, how do we commence the process of dismantling these internal chronicles of inadequacy? It begins with the acknowledgement that our self-doubt is a narrative, not an immutable sentence. It is a mind-created construct, not an unalterable verity regarding our worth. The subsequent step, and it is a courageous one, involves stepping forth into our authentic selves. This entails a readiness to present ourselves, imperfections and all, and to cease the exhausting performance of attempting to be someone we are not. When we undertake this, we begin to dismantle the internal impediments that have obstructed us from forging genuine connections and from truly believing in our own capabilities. The fear of emotional exposure, the dread of rejection, the apprehension of insufficiency, these constitute the bedrock of the self-doubt narrative. By confronting these fears and electing authenticity, we loosen the narrative's tenacious grip. However, this odyssey of self-belief, this process of liberating our minds from the thrall of doubt, is not exclusively an internal undertaking. It necessitates, as well, an understanding of how these internal transformations influence our engagements with the world and with our fellow beings. It means actively fostering environments where our true selves can not only endure, but indeed flourish. It entails learning to cultivate relationships that are predicated upon this newly discovered authenticity, and learning to trust that the connections we forge when we are genuinely ourselves are the ones that will endure and nurture us. Conclusion: we have traversed the intricate corridors of our own consciousness, unearthing the clandestine architects of our most profound anxieties. The arresting revelation, as our exploration has unveiled, is that the most unyielding fortresses are not constructed of stone and mortar, but of the narratives we meticulously weave for ourselves. These are not mere ephemeral thoughts. They are the incessant drone of anxious monologues, the self-spun skeins of hypothetical dread, the phantasmal menaces conjured by the boundless theater of our imagination. Far more often than not, the events themselves are imbued with an inherent neutrality, such as a simple electronic missive, or a tranquil evening. It is the meaning we arbitrarily assign, the direst possible outcomes we contrive, that precipitate our suffering. Our minds, in their misguided zeal to shield us, can paradoxically engage in a form of self-deception, convincing us that these fabricated accounts are immutable verities, and that our visceral reactions of fear or sorrow are unerring indicators that something catastrophic is unfolding, specifically directed at us. This treatise has been dedicated to the recognition of these mind-created narratives for precisely what they are: potent, yet ultimately fallacious, projections that pilfer our serenity and erect formidable barriers to genuine communion with ourselves and with others. I extend my profound gratitude for accompanying me on this illuminating odyssey. The pathway to liberation, as we have discerned, is anchored by a constellation of principles, deceptively simple yet profoundly transformative. Foremost among these is the cultivation of the capacity to identify and gently dismantle these self-generated narratives. Envision your anxious cognitions as the sensationalized pronouncements of a tabloid journalist. They frequently seize your attention through alarmist rhetoric and hyperbolic embellishment, rather than adhering to the austere dictates of fact. It is imperative to internalize the distinction that a fact is an objective occurrence, whereas a narrative is the intricate edifice your mind constructs around it. Should your supervisor summon you for a meeting on a Monday morning, the indisputable fact is merely the scheduling of an appointment. The mind-created narrative, however, might unfurl as I am about to be terminated. This fabricated story, not the meeting itself, becomes the wellspring of your apprehension. The ability to disentangle the objective event from the subjective interpretation represents a paradigm shift of monumental consequence. We imbue every experience with significance, and when that significance is saturated with anxiety, it inevitably breeds suffering. Secondly, we have undertaken a courageous interrogation of our aversion to feelings. Have you ever paused to earnestly question, why do I harbor such trepidation towards experiencing sadness, or anxiety, or even a mere sense of ennui? With striking frequency, we find ourselves more terrified of the feeling itself than of any tangible peril. Yet, emotions are inherently transient, akin to the ever-shifting atmospheric conditions. They manifest and they dissipate. Our mind-created narratives, conversely, can insidiously persuade us that a feeling is an immutable tempest destined to engulf us. When we confront a feeling, even one of considerable discomfort, with unwavering courage, we invariably discover its ephemeral nature. We learn that we possess the inherent fortitude to navigate it, much as dropping a piece of toast does not signify the cataclysmic end of the world. This cultivated capacity to reside with our emotions, eschewing the immediate impulse to fabricate an escape narrative, engenders a formidable reservoir of inner resilience. Finally, we have delved into the profound liberation that accrues from embracing our authentic selves and forging genuine connections. The imperative to be all things to all people is an illusory and exhausting pursuit, invariably leading to the concealment of our true nature, thereby constructing a veritable prison of inauthenticity. Each of us possesses a unique inner card, and the ultimate aspiration is not to masquerade as someone else's offering, but to discover kindred spirits who genuinely appreciate and value our own unique hand. When we relinquish the futile endeavor of striving to be a universally appealing entity, we can cease our desperate posture as sellers of a counterfeit persona and instead assume the confident stance of buyers of our own intrinsic worth. Our imperfections, our idiosyncrasies, and even our perceived quirks are not liabilities, they are, in fact, the very elements that render us relatable and pave the way for authentic connection with those who perceive and accept us in our unvarnished entirety. Conceive of a mind no longer held captive by its own fearful projections. This is the liberated mind. It is a state wherein external occurrences are met with unclouded clarity rather than impending dread. It is a sanctuary where emotions are navigated with resolute courage, not evaded with panicked flight. It is a fertile ground where authentic connection thrives, unhindered by the ramparts of fear and fabricated narratives. This emancipation is not contingent upon altering the external world, it is predicated upon transforming the internal narratives we construct about it and, crucially, about ourselves. It is the dawning realization that we possess the sovereign power to choose our beliefs, and that true tranquility emanates from the acceptance of our authentic self, rather than from the Sisyphean struggle to conform to some imagined ideal. This undertaking is not a singular event, but a continuous, evolving practice. The whispers of narrative may still insinuate themselves, the stirrings of fear may persist, but you are now equipped with the very keys to unlock your mind. Persevere in the application of these principles, even in the smallest of daily gestures. Exercise profound kindness towards yourself when familiar patterns resurface. The liberated mind awaits your full presence. Step forth with unwavering resolve, embrace the totality of your authentic self, and embark upon a life unburdened by the narratives you have wisely chosen to relinquish.